Good afternoon, and welcome to our session, Building a Business Around the Google Places API. My name is Andrés, and I am with the Google Maps Developer Relations team.
And I'm Marcelo with the Place API team.
So our session today is broken up into two parts. In the first part, we're going to do a conceptual overview. We're going to quickly walk through the features of the Places API. And then we're also going to talk about the vision that we have for how developers can build a business around the Places API. And then in the second part of the session, we're actually going to talk about the practical use of features of the Places API in building an application that demonstrates how to build a business. When Marcelo and I first began to discuss the idea for this session, we knew that surfing was going to be a natural fit. Marcelo and I are both surfers. We've talked about the use cases around location-based applications and surfing. And so we quickly discovered that this session would be a great opportunity to showcase a surfing application. So we'll touch on this a little bit later on, but keep in mind that the theme for our entire session is surfing. All right, so let's talk about the Google Places API. As I mentioned, I'm going to do a quick overview of the Places API, pretty much make sure that we're all on the same page, and this is also for the benefit of those folks out there who may not be familiar with the API. The API is accessible in two ways. One, as a JavaScript library that's part of the Google Maps JavaScript API. And the other way is as an HTTP-based web service that accepts GET and POST requests. Now, both of these elements of the API share some common features. And we'll touch on these as we walk through the application that we designed. But I also want to touch on a couple of things that we announced earlier today. And these are some features that developers have been asking for quite a bit. The first is the incorporation of reviews. So you can now get the top 5 reviews that are associated with any given place through the API. And this is applicable to both the library and the web service. We've also included paging, so that you can now get results in sets of 20, up to a total of 60. And lastly, we've included text search. So this is more of a natural type of a search where you can use, for example, near as a modifier. So you could search for pizza in New York City or coffee in Mountain View, California, those types of searches. And again, we'll come back to that a little bit later on in the session. It's also worth noting that the web service also provides some additional capabilities. We provide place reports. So this is the ability to add or delete a place. And this is places that are specific to your application. You can do the same with events. And lastly, we offer a check-in feature, which really is more of a bump. It increases the signal and gives more prominence to the places where your users are checking in. So these are all relative to your application. The next thing I want to touch on is the data that's accessible as part of the Google Places API. Now, we've touched on this before. We have a lot of places that are accessible as part of the Places API. How many places? 80+ million places. So we have global coverage. It's quite significant. Marcelo, I snuck this photo in here for your benefit. You want to tell folks where this is?
Yeah, it is a little bit familiar to me. That's the beach of Ipanema in Rio, where I'm from. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I was there about a month ago for 2 days, but I made sure that on one of those days I went for a run and got to know some of the places around there as well. So we've got places like Ipanema. You can actually access all different types of places using the API. And this is great. So you can go to a place, you can search by proximity, you can see what's around you. But in addition to providing sort of this base information, we also have some extended details that are associated with the places in our API. And this is kind of what boils down to providing intelligence to your users. So we have things like structured address information. We have things like ratings. I mentioned reviews. We also have the contact information and much more information about all these places. So we have global coverage. different types of places. I think it's over 100 different types of places, right, Marcelo? And extended details for all these places. When I was preparing for this session, I figured it'd be good to put together a demo. And so I just, sort of off the top of my head, started thinking about different types of places that I could search for around the world. So the first place that I searched for, of course, was Rio de Janeiro. Marcelo keeps raving about how good the food is back in Brazil, and I have to agree. Now that I've been in Rio, that is the case. I spent a significant amount of time in Portland, Oregon, back in the day, as it were. And so I figured I'd search for bookstores, because I know there's a lot of bookstores in Portland. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Powell's City of Books, which is a bookstore that takes up about an entire city block. It's 3 stories high. If you ever make it to Portland, this is a must-see place. Gas stations in Tokyo, you can see some geographic patterns here. Of course, there's not going to be any gas stations in the southern part in Chiyoda, in that precinct. I looked for schools in Bangkok, and lastly, I looked for hotels in Cairo. I think you guys get the idea, right? We have a lot of places around the world. It's very easy to find them. Next, I'm going to demo, and this is a live demo, so at the risk of doing a live demo, but I want to talk about the autocomplete feature and just how really neat this feature can be. What we've done here is we've provided just an input field here, and we also have your typical online address form where all of the fields are broken out into different input boxes. By the way, who out there has not ever entered address information into a web page, into an online form like this? All right. Who out there enjoyed it? OK? All right. So it dawned on me this morning as I was coming up to San Francisco, because I live down in Mountain View. It dawned on me this morning that I should really look up the address for Moscone Center. I know the landmark. I've been here many times, but it actually dawned on me that I don't know the address. So let's search for the address. It's 580 Howard Street. And this is a predictive type of a search, right? So it's going to try to guess what it is that I'm looking for. So as I type in characters, you'll see that, OK, it's thinking I'm looking for maybe 28 or 5800 Techni Center in Austin. Sounds like a cool place, but that's not really what I'm looking for. And as I advance, you'll see that after 7 characters, it's already sort of predicted and found the place that I'm looking for. And once I select that, I can use the JavaScript library and pre-populate those fields. So, I mean, this is a really neat feature. I think your users will thank you time and time again. And you're giving them essentially access to all these millions of places in just a few keystrokes. But that's not really it, right? I mean, we need to talk a little bit more about our vision, right, Marcelo?
Yeah, that's correct. And it is a pleasure to be here today to talk about the Place API. But since I first learned, let me introduce myself again before that. My name is Marcelo, and I'm the lead engineer for the Place API team in Sydney. And I want to tell you, since I first learned I would be here at Google I/O to talk about the Place API, I've been looking forward to the opportunity to talk about the long-term vision that our team has for the product. It all starts at the realization that technology is really reshaping people's behavior, the way we shop, the way we work, the way we communicate with each other. That's, of course, all old news when it comes to the online aspects of our lives. But also, increasingly, we're seeing technology, especially mobile, having an impact on how we interact with the physical world around us, the way we learn about new places, the way we discover our surroundings, and also how we make decisions about where to go, and even about how to spend our time and money. And we see there's an opportunity to have a huge impact for the good on people's lives, and to make that at a real large scale. And that's our goal with the Place API. But of course, the challenge of realizing this vision is much greater than just Google. And that's where developers come into the picture. We know that it's going to take a great amount of effort and innovation, entrepreneurship from both small and big players to make this vision come true. But we also know that this kind of large-scale distributed efforts, they usually tend to revolve around ecosystems. And that's what the Place API is all about. The Place API is about creating the conditions and the incentives for such an ecosystem to flourish and prosper. The API is a first step towards enabling an ecosystem of location-based services and applications. So that's our vision, right? And based on this vision, I want to touch on, thank you, I want to touch on 4 basic principles that not only guide our thinking when we design the Place API, but also are closely related to creating interesting location-based applications and applications that will make the life of your users better. And that's how you want your app to be described if you're trying to build a business out of it. So the first principle is a very fundamental one. Specialists do it better. We believe that an app that is highly specialized has a better chance at meeting its users' expectations and needs when compared to an app that is a generic app, an app that tries to be everything to everyone. The more specialized an app is, the better it can understand its user and its use case, and more insight it can have on the data that it's serving. And as I said, it's a very fundamental principle, and it permeates this entire session. So principle number 2, the base data is not enough. And when I say this, I'm actually trying to say the Place API is not enough. And I'll give you 2 reasons for that. First, the Place API data is generic by nature, by design, because it has to work for every type of application that you guys came up with. And the second reason, and you have to keep that in mind at all times, is whatever data your app is getting out of the Place API is easily accessible to competing products. So if all your app is doing is getting data out of the Place API and passing through to your users, you're not really differentiating your app in terms of data in any meaningful way. You're not really giving your user a reason to stick to your application instead of using a competing product. So that's why you have to go beyond the base data. You have to try to differentiate your application. And that takes us to principle number 3, finding is greater than searching. Always keep in mind, searching is standing between your user and what the task is trying to accomplish. Search has a cost in terms of the time and effort, cognitive effort for your user. So you got to design your app in a way that you're minimizing the time that your user spends searching. And in addition to paying closing attention to your UI and automating as much as you can, you also have to have a deep understanding of your user's intentions, a deep understanding of your use case, and a deep understanding of the data, of the specialized data your app is serving. And that brings us back to, again, principle number 1. The more specialized your application is, the easier time it's going to have that kind of insight. And now, before I go into principle number 4, let me step back and look at the idea of the ecosystem again. First, you have Google, who is collecting and indexing all sorts of local data and making the data easily available through the Place API. Next, you have you, developers, creating great local apps that consume data out of the Place API, but also augment it with their own specialized data that you also yourself collect. Next, you've got users who use those apps to go out in the real world, explore, discover new places, but also make decisions, especially purchase decisions. Who is missing from this picture? Exactly. You sir, pay attention. Merchants. Merchants are missing from this picture. And that takes us to principle number 4. Merchants are a key part of the ecosystem. And again, I'm going to give you 2 reasons. First, merchants are a great source of specialized data. They are the ultimate specialists on their line of business and also on the community they're operating in. So they should be part of your data crowdsourcing mix. The second reason is, what is it merchants want the most? Customers, exactly. So they want customers so they can sell their products and services. But who are those customers? Users. Very good. I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? Users, their customers are the user of your application. So if you're running a highly specialized application, they're going to be a really good match between the merchants and the users. So your app will be sitting at a really interesting spot between merchants that are trying to sell and consumers who may be willing to buy if well-informed and incentivized. And that's the reason why you have to try to engage merchants into your service. That's the reason why merchants are a key part of the ecosystem. Right, so those are the principles. Right, so now Andrés and I are going to go through the steps of actually using those principles and using the Place API to try to build an actual location-based application. Are you ready, man?
I'm ready. I'm ready. So, as Marcelo mentioned, or as I mentioned, I guess as well, we're really keen on building and designing a surfing application that accommodates all of these things. And with that, I think we should gear up, right? We should really take it to the next level.
Let's do it.
And gear up for building our application.
Moment.
I mean, you can't really say you're going to design a surf app if you're not going to look like a surfer.
Look good, man.
All right. By the way, I wanted the red shirt, but Marcelo said he wanted it.
So just before we go into the key requirements, I want to tell you why we've chosen to build a surf app. So the reason number one, we wanted to build a specialized app, right? Lead by example. And although I wouldn't call ourselves specialists in surf, we're both surfers, and we really, at least a little bit knowledgeable and really passionate about the subject. The second reason is I wanted to go to do something that is outside of, what you usually think when you think of location-based applications. I didn't want to stick with suggesting restaurants or hotels. And I think surfing is probably out of the comfort zone for most people here in this room. And lastly, I wanted to have fun.
You did want to have fun. And I will say, though, when I put together my 100-plus page requirements document, and I think it included a lot of features, you quickly shot.
But we only have 20 minutes.
A lot of them down. Yeah, I guess so. All right, so let's talk about the key requirements, Marcelo.
All right, so requirement number one, I want to allow my users to find nearby surf spots. I mean, that's the basic functionality
it's a no-brainer
of any location-based service, right? But that's not enough. Just knowing what the surf spots are, not enough. As a surfer, I also want to know what the surf looks like right now and in the near future. So the second key requirement is the ability to provide surf reports and forecasts.
Of course, we don't want to head out there if we know the surf spot, but we don't know what it's going to be like. I mean, it could be a flat day.
It does cost money because you have to pay for the gas at least. So, but just the basic requirements are not enough. Those will be enough for me to go to a friend of mine, a surfer, and show his app. I wouldn't be embarrassed. But I want more than that. I want to surprise my user. I want to delight them. I want them to actually be talking about the application to their friends, right? Because that's the best type of marketing tool you can have. So I want some magic.
Where do you put it?
I want some
magic. During our design meetings, you want some magic.
Are you happy with that?
Almost, Marcelo. See, you always get to talk about the fun stuff, but then I have to bring things back to reality.
You're my wingman.
We need the profit. We need to pay the bills at the end
enough.
of the day, right? And we especially need to build up that war chest for that surf safari that we're going to go on after we
I'm sold.
After we finish building this application. So profit is an important part of it as well.
So right, how do we make money out of this application? Okay, so the first task is how do you list nearby surf spots using the Place API. So what I'm doing here is I'm calling the nearby search endpoint. And all I'm doing is really simple to use, as you can see. I'm providing a location, and which happens to be my home turf back in Sydney, and a radius of 2 kilometers. And when I execute that search, bang, I get back a bunch of places. Can you see any surf spot there on that results, Andres?
None of the surf spots that you and I have hit any time that I've been in Sydney.
Yeah, so there's no surf spots there. And the reason is really simple. Google doesn't index surf spots. And Jeff is here. Maybe he can work on indexing surf spots in the future. That'll be really useful for surfers all over. So yeah, Google doesn't index surf spots. So how do I solve this problem? So there was where specialized knowledge comes in. I know the area really well, so I can list surf spots myself. So what I have here is a list of all the surf spots just in the DY area, just the name and the location. So I'm going to use that data, and I'm going to feed it into the place API using another endpoint. That's the place, add a place endpoint. So I just call maps API place add. It's a post request. I'm parsing the CSV file over there, setting up the request with just the surf spot location and the name, and bang.
But Marcelo, I need to interrupt you real quick, so just to point something out. I mean, this is a representative sample of code, right, for the Python script that we wrote to get the data up there. But what I want to mention is it actually wasn't that much more code. I think it was less than 20 lines of code that we wrote. When we were sitting down, we were sort of surprised. We were kind of like, we really want to, I mean, I think we kind of wanted code more.
The place API is really simple to use, really simple to learn. Yeah. And that's actually always be a challenge for us to come up with an interesting presentation about it.
All right, so what next?
So now I'm going to redo my place search. And now the only thing I'm adding is the type equals other there, so that the only thing I'm going to get back is the surf spot that I added.
Right, and that's because, as you mentioned before, we don't have a place type called surf spot.
Unfortunately, we don't have a surf spot.
At least not yet.
Yeah,
okay.
Not yet.
All right, so here are the surf spots we added.
Yeah, can you recognize them?
I do. I recognize almost all of them, and I want to point out that there is this one surf spot, and let me highlight it, actually. That place here. And
it is quite far away, isn't it?
You know, every time that I've been to Sydney, to the Sydney office, and Marcelo and I have gone surfing, he's actually never mentioned this surf spot. You want to tell folks what you told me?
You don't want to go there.
Yeah, you want to tell folks what you told me?
That's called Bombi, right? And it's a big rider surf spot. You've got to step up your game, man, before I can take you there. Honestly, I don't want to see you crying like a baby.
Well, just for the record, last time I was not crying, I was just whining. And I think there's a big difference there. So just keep that in mind. All right, what next? OK,
so now we listed the surf spots. What we want to do is actually also provide the surfing conditions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a US government website that provides current and forecast data about weather and ocean data as well. So I have my service set up like this. I have a cron job that goes regularly and fetches the data, the most recent run from the US website, matches the data against the surf spots I have on my database, and uploads the result into the Place API so that the next time a user does a search, you're going to get back the wave forecast for that specific surf spot attached to the data.
Okay.
And this is how so what I'm doing here actually is I'm using the event endpoint in a very creative way, because it wasn't really designed for this type of use, but I mean, you can use it however you want. And I hope my PM is not here. Oh, he's okay. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm attaching an event to the surf spot. But instead of describing the event in the summary, what I'm doing, I'm using the summary to attach the wave data, the surf ratings for now and the current next few hours for that surf spot. And when I do my search again, for each surf spot, I'm going to get the event attached with the data there, so I can easily display it on my application.
OK, so we've got the beginnings of a pretty good app here, right? I mean, and we've incorporated some of the principles that we discussed before. This is a highly specialized app, right? It's a surfing app by surfers, for surfers. Actually, we need to brand that. But the other thing is we've gone beyond the base data, right? We've added our surf spots. And in addition to that, we've also added some value to the user by providing some additional context, right? And that's essentially the surf forecast and conditions.
We can tick off two principles so far.
Two principles so far.
You know, specialize and go beyond the base data.
Yeah. So I mean, if we take a look at our surf spots now, we get a pretty good indication of whether we should head to the 4-star, surf spot or not. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer. Yep. But that's not really enough, right?
No.
I mean, this is a nice app. It's compelling. I'd probably use it. But we need to go beyond that. And this is where the magic that you're talking about comes in.
Yeah. So now I want to surprise my user. I want to delight him. I want to get him really engaged with the application. I want him to return to my app on a daily basis because I want to turn this into a business. So I want this relationship to be a long-term relationship with my user. So I want to get to know him better. I want to get to understand him, understand his preferences. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to offer the option for him to check in and out of the surf spot. So before you go into a surf session, you check in. When you come back, you check out. It's not really hard. I actually check my phone every time I go for a surf. And when I'm back, I want to know what time it is because, I've got to work. And so I think that's something that surfers would actually get to use. And in return of that check-in and out, I'm going to offer him something. What I'm going to offer him is some analytics about his surfing practice. Maybe I can show him, what are the surf spots that he hits the most, or I can show him the average length of a surfing session. And I'm pretty sure this will be compelling for most surfers. I would definitely use it. Would you?
I definitely would. And again, I need to point out that you did want to call these analytics something, Marcelo. You want to tell everybody what you wanted to call them?
Yeah, I would like to call it surfalytics.
Surfalytics, folks. You heard it here first. So we're gathering a lot of data for the user, and that's really beneficial for the user. But what if we take it one step farther, and we start taking that data at aggregate, and now using it to provide some additional information to our other users? So one of the things that surfers kind of hate the most are crowded surf spots. So if we know that folks are checking in, we could allow folks to kind of get a sense for how crowded a particular surf spot is. So for example, DY Point, Marcelo, if there were 17 people that checked in the last hour to DY Point,
no, you don't want to go to DY Point. No. It's a point break.
Yeah.
It take 10 people at most.
Yeah.
So I would definitely use the feature. I could see myself using that feature to deciding where to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
But now that I know my user, right, I want to go beyond. I really want to surprise him. So I know where he's going for surf. I know the time that he's going for surf. And I know the kind of surfing that he likes. Is he a big rider? Does he like medium-sized waves or tiny little waves like my friend here, Andrés? Different people like different kind of waves. So what I want to do is I want to pop up a notification on his phone saying, hey, there's a good surf session coming up in the next couple of days. Maybe you want to prepare yourself. And if he clicks through the notification, he'll get a notification landing page where he can see what the prediction conditions are.
In this case, they are epic. That's right.
Conditions are epic.
Yeah.
And set up an alarm or set up a reminder, plan himself, or he can just say, you know what, I won't be able to make it.
I'm going to be up late tonight coding, and I'm probably going to be too tired to go surfing tomorrow.
So, I can see the campaign right here. Sweet surf.
Yeah.
Don't never lose a epic swell again, or something like it.
Yeah. Well, I think we're moving in the right direction here. But again, coming back, we've covered all the fun stuff, Marcelo. But we have to come back to the things that I talked about, paying the bills. So we need to incorporate.
You're like an anchor, man. You're like an anchor.
We need to incorporate commerce into our application. And we really want to do it in two ways, right? I mean, the first way is our users are consumers, and they're interested in goods and services, as Marcelo mentioned. So we want to use the Places API to show them goods and services that they're interested in. So what are surfers interested in? Surf shops, probably surf schools, right? So we could easily use the Places API and the standard search functionality, and two of the key features here, the ability to filter by keyword and the ability to rank by distance. Now, we've been referring to this amongst ourselves as a commodity search, right? So if a surfer is searching for something, say, like surf wax, they don't really care which shop they're going to go to. They just want to find the nearest surf shop so that they can get the wax their board, and get on about going surfing. So here's a demo that shows a search, which uses the default results. These are the top 5 results ranked by prominence. And what we can do is, if we rank them by distance, we see that the radius shortens, and we actually see that places are a lot closer to the origin of our search. Subsequently then, and now we're talking about the base data, right? Subsequently then, we can present something like this to our user. Now, imagine that, as is often the case, if you've been out there and you've been really pushing yourself, like I do, and you've been riding some pretty big waves, sometimes your board gets dinged and you want to get a repair. So enter the merchants. There's nothing stopping us from giving merchants access to our application and allowing them to use the events feature to add time-based incentives, in this case, offers, for their target audience, for surfers. So now if I do the same type of search, this commodity search, there's a differentiator there. And there's something that's probably going to drive me, and I can see that, hey, if I just drive a little bit farther, I'm going to drop off my surfboard, and I'm going to get a discount on the surfboard that I'm going to rent to go out there and hit the 20-foot waves that I typically surf. All right, so I think we've brought it all together now, right? I mean, we've incorporated a lot of the key features. We've touched on all of the principles that you were talking about. I actually snuck something else in here, though. So today we announced the support for reviews in the Places API. And so there's another type of search that we can enable for our users as well, which is more of a qualitative type of a search, right? So if I'm looking for a surf school, I'm less concerned about how close it is and more concerned about the quality of it. So I can provide search results based on the Places API that look more like this, where a user can see how a particular surf school is rated. And then they can actually dig in a little bit deeper and see what people are saying about that surf school. Is it the type of surf school that they'd want to take their family to, for example?
You got to keep in mind there's always a trade-off between the time your user spends is allowing to invest in searching and the cost of making a wrong decision. So the higher the cost of making a wrong decision, the more time will allow himself, the more time he will invest in doing a search. If he's searching for a surf school, he wants not the cheapest, he wants the best experience. So the cost of making a mistake when choosing a surf school is high. So he'll spend more time doing that search. The cost of making a mistake when choosing a surf shop to buy wax is none. So he will just do what we call the commodity search.
All right, so we've talked quite a bit about our sample app, SweetSurf. And this is really not the end, though. I mean, I think this is just the beginning. Something that Marcelo touched on at the beginning is that we envision an ecosystem of location-based apps. So we are providing a platform, but we're really counting on all of you all to take it to the next level, to take that step and start building applications that connect users with merchants, that allow merchants to provide that quality engagement, that quality commodity, as you put it.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, we just started with API. It's going to go a lot further in terms of functionality and in terms of the data and in terms of the quality. So with that, I'd like to thank you guys for attending on behalf of the Place API team. And we're going to open the mics for questions.
Do we have the number of check-ins for a particular place?
We do have, but we don't expose that to applications. So the idea of the check-in is it's only you're providing a signal of how relevant that place is to your users, and we use that signal when we ranking results. So currently we don't provide any information back about check-ins currently. No. And one of the reasons is privacy concerns.
Hello. I have a couple of questions. The Places API, is it still bound to the same licensing scheme as the Maps API for commercial applications? Calls?
So we have our PM here, Thor.
Yeah, we're going to call our PM up here. Put him in the hotspot. Just kidding.
We're going to get personal now.
That's right.
Oh.
We are a very close team.
Increasingly so, it seems. Oh, perfect. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so the Places API is considered part of the Maps API family, so it is subject to the Maps API, existing Maps API terms of service. There are a few small differences that are peculiar to the Places API. For example, most of the Maps APIs are, there is a requirement that you must use the service in conjunction with a Google Map. The Places API, you can actually use it without a Google Map, as long as there is an alternative, which is a small powered by Google logo that you use instead. Although what you can't do is use it with other providers' maps. So we've seen a lot of mobile location-based apps that don't need a map, they just need to show people places nearby to let them check in, and in that case, that's fine. However, also another small difference is that in the web-based Maps API, you're not permitted to use the free Maps API in a for-fee application, one that you sell for money. A caveat to that in the Maps API terms of service that's often overlooked is that does not apply to mobile apps sold through online app stores, such as Google Play or the iTunes App Store. So many of these location-based apps that use the Places API fall into that category. But beyond that, with the restrictions that we have regarding things like use in private applications, those kinds of restrictions do still apply.
Okay. And the second question I have really deals with your implementation of the Surf app. You all had a small number of points, so you could deal with it in a sense, in a way that's much easier than dealing with a large set of data. So let's say I'm looking at all the restaurants in the US. What immutable piece of data comes back from the Places API can I use to bridge that to data in my custom database?
So for every request, every result you get back from the Place API, you got an ID. And that ID is constant for that place, for the life of that place.
Okay, thank you.
So that's what you have to use to map it back to your database.
Thank you.
On the Maps API, will there be functionality or at least a flag for us to determine whether or not a business has been claimed by the owner?
There is not that functionality right now, but it is something that we are interested in looking into, and also in helping you understand whether the owner of a business is also a user of your application.
Can you say that last part? I'm sorry.
Something else that we're investigating is the possibility of helping you understand whether the owner of a business is also a user of your application.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the concept of hierarchy of places. Do you guys have a concept of hierarchy, and what are you doing around that?
You mean a hierarchy of types?
Specifically, Moscone might have multiple conference rooms inside of it, for example.
No, the Place API currently has no notion of hierarchy. We do have, that's one of the reasons why we added events, but well, I mean, it's not the same thing. But you could add, in the case of Moscone, you could add a room as an event, right? Mm-hmm. You would have a time to leave, but it would work for the case, for instance, of a conference.
Cool, thank you.
So if we have no, we do.
I'm just experimenting with it, and I did a search for cafe as one of their classifications, and I was hoping back the icon would be a picture of a cup, and it always comes back a fork and spoon, and I'm just wondering if that's because...
When was that test that you run, just now? For any reason? Because we just fixed that bug yesterday.
Okay, thank you.
I should stress that's entirely coincidental. We don't just leave all the bugs until the day before I.O.
Great.
I'll just mention that we do also have a fireside chat last session tomorrow. So if you have broader questions about the Maps APIs generally, including the Places API and any of the other features or announcements we've made over the course of today and tomorrow, and that's a great opportunity to spend an hour grilling us mercilessly.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.